Hi there, I'm Ian Hancock, Director of Products at Erwin, and welcome to another webcast on API development with Erwin EA Agile. In this session, I'm going to walk you through some of the tooling that we're using to demonstrate the API development in EA Agile. I'm also going to show you how you can use the CSV import and export capabilities from the APIs. Okay. So before we start, let's take a look at one of the apps that we're going to be using today. So the app's called Postman. You can see the web address at the top. If we have a little look inside, we can see it describes itself as an API development environment. It works on Mac, Windows, or Linux. So you're going to need to download this if you want to follow along with this tutorial. I'll just show you briefly around the app itself. So as you can see, it has a main screen. You get tabs along the top. Down here on a tab, you get the option to be able to choose what type of API action you'd like to take. We're going to be using POST, so HTTP POST requests. In here, you can specify your URL. You have the ability to choose your authentication method. We'll be using basic auth. You can put headers in. We won't be using them. In the main body, you can also put key value pairs. If we hit this drop down here, you can also attach files. We'll be using the file attachment method. So you'll see all that in the coming video. Now I just thought I'd show you one other thing which is pretty useful when doing API development. We're not actually going to use this in the video, but if you're having problems getting your HTTP requests to work, this is an excellent little website. Basically, you go on there, you create yourself an account. You can say, click the button to say you want to create a request bin, and what this actually does is creates you a URL to send your HTTP request to. And essentially what you do is you just copy that out. You can then paste that into Postman. You can put your auth in there, put a password in, adjust your body. You can put your key value pairs in, attach files, etc. So I can just put test in there. I can say it's text, hello, and then when I send it, it'll return an OK. If we then flip back to request bin and refresh the page, it will now have sent that request to this website. Do be careful, obviously, if you're sending passwords or any sensitive information. This is an external site. But here you can see the test hello, you can see the parameters that came in, you can see what type of encoding and everything else. So it gives you a good way of diagnosing the other side of what's happening. So you can see if, for instance, you're using Zapier and you're not quite sure of the configuration, you'll be able to see whether it's sending out what you're expecting it to be sending out. So just a useful tip there. As I say, we're not really covering it in this tutorial, but good to have in the back pocket. Okay, that's enough background. So the main aim of this session was to demonstrate how we can import and export CSV content into the Erwin EA Agile platform. So first of all, we're going to have a look at import. I've got a pre-prepared CSV file, a workspace ready to import into, and I'm going to use Postman to do the post request. So let's take a look at how it fits together. Here's my workspace. I'm just going to take a copy of the URL, makes it easier to work with. Let's open up Postman and paste the URL in. We're going to do a post request. We're just going to edit that URL a little bit. So we want to access the API object import, and we don't need a view. We're going to select the basic auth to log in with, which is, as you recall, just a username and password. Let me just check that one's right. Update the request. It's actually put something in the header, but we don't need to worry. So we're going to make sure that we're using form data. We're going to add the file. Just use the word file in there for the key. For the value, we're going to pick the actual file to load in, my pre-prepared CSV file. And that's it. Let's just press send. It really is pretty simple. You'll see the requests come back. You can see it's got the object that's been updated. It says success. So in that very quick example, we took a CSV file which happened just to have one element in it, and we imported it into the workspace. Now the CSV file can obviously include many items. You have to make sure that the CSV file does include the name of the object, the type of the object, and that's basically the minimum requirements. Obviously you're probably going to put some other values in there too. The easiest way to find out what content should be in a CSV file is to do an export first to see what the content looks like. So why don't we take a look at that now? Very similarly to the way that we did the import, we're going to walk you through how you do an export. Now an export differs a little bit from the import in that it also takes a view parameter. Now this is to constrain the amount of information that comes back. Obviously you don't want to be exporting everything from the model, and with the CSV style of export you are going to be exporting bulk data. So a view makes a nice way of being able to encapsulate this content. So before you do this, you will have to already have some views inside your workspace, but naturally you will have these anyway. So what I'm going to show you is going from the view in the Agile platform, writing the post request in Postman, and getting your content delivered to the file system. We'll then open the zip file and take a look inside, and we'll see the CSVs that have been exported. So let's do that now. Once again, we're going to copy the URL and put that into Postman. So let's choose a post request, paste the URL. Once again, we're going to have to edit this because we want to put in the API, and we want to say that we want to do an object export. We're going to keep the view in this time, but we do have to change it a little bit just to make it into a parameter. So you'll see the little edit there. Again, let's select the basic auth, put the username and password in. Update the request. Take a look at the body. We don't need anything, but this time I'm going to choose send and download. This actually gets Postman to download the response into a file. Now it does come straight back as a zip, so we'll save that out as a zip file. And let's take a look at the file system and see what we got. So we'll open up the response.zip file that came back. If we have a look inside, we'll see that we got the objects. We also got a relationships.csv. Now what will happen is, if in a view you have multiple different object types, you'll have multiple object CSV files, one for each type, and also all the relationships that are associated inside that view will be in the relationships CSV file. What does this mean when it comes to importing? Well, importing is exactly the same thing. Although we only showed you importing a object file, it's also possible to bring in multiple object files and a relationships file. You do that by putting all the files together and zipping them up in exactly the same way as we got it through the export. If you package them up in the same way for the import, you will get the reverse effect. So you'll bring your objects in and you'll bring your relationships in. What happens about collisions? Well, collisions are obviously something to consider when doing import. The collision criteria for objects is the name and the type. So if you bring in an object of a name of a certain type and it doesn't exist already in the workspace, it will be created. If it does exist, it will update the properties that you bring in. If you don't specify a value for one of the properties that you're bringing in, it will not overwrite it. So if you want to wipe out content, you'll have to put something in there to make it erase. For relationships, the criteria is basically the full set of information that's in the CSV. So a relationship is unique if its source and target are the same and it's the same association type. Well, hopefully that quick introduction to APIs in ERwin Agile EA has been useful. If you've got any questions, be sure to put them in our forums and we'll be happy to answer them. Thanks for listening.